We are live, and welcome to the PCC podcast, the live recording of this episode. For you, if you are in our free Facebook community, you're getting exclusive access to this right up front. So super pumped for you. But I'm really excited to be launching this series, y'all. So this is the exactly how I would coach you special from, start to finish. I'm going to walk you through basically everything that you need to know to coach yourself, essentially. And if you wanted to take all the information in the next 4 episodes, write it down on paper, plug it in as detailed as possible into your own life, you would be able to see drastic transformation in your life. Now, that doesn't mean that it comes without work, energy, intention, and commitment, but I am going to give you everything. I'm not going to gatekeep anything. And if I miss anything and I'm going through this series and you're watching, maybe you're watching on Facebook and you want to comment or send me a message, email, whatever, I'll put my information for you to contact me for the podcast in the show notes. If I miss something, I'll just answer it. My goal is to help people, millions of women, transform their bodies for good. And the only way I'm going to be able to reach millions in my lifetime that I can see fathomable is not by only doing our one-on-one coaching service, but by giving away this information, because what I know is that it's not the information that people are paying for when they come to online coaching to work with us at PCC. They're paying for who they're doing it with and having a trusted confidant in the process, because this journey is tough and it's going to test you, and it tests our commitment, it tests our accountability, and having a partner in that can be very, very valuable. So without further ado, this is going to be exactly how I would coach you through fat loss to lose weight permanently for the very, very last time in a 4-part series. And so part 1 is going to be, how would we start off? How would I coach you to basically get all of the groundwork set? And this is where things are very, very different than even how I coached people in the past, but also just how most coaches, period, operate. And so the very first thing that most people would do, and I know this because I did this for years as well, is we would start with tracking. We would just open MyFitnessPal. I would have you sync it up. I'd have you share your account, and you would track everything that you eat, and we'd set macros from there. And I would just plug your body weight into a formulaic equation that you can literally find online. There's like a bajillion macro calculators that can tell you what your caloric intake should be, what your macronutrient split should be, and you'll get different answers from every single one. It's the most frustrating thing in the world, but that's what I would do. And I would basically have people just start tracking and counting their macros. And I would say, hit these numbers within a couple grams and you'll see results. And that is exactly how you set yourself up for a lot of frustration and failure. So that is what most people do. That is what most coaches do. And if you don't know this, I'm a part of a business mentorship that I've hired to help me grow and scale my business, PCC. But within that mentorship, they've actually given me an honorary position to be kind of the coach of the coaches. So I have over 300 online health and fitness coaches under me that ask me questions about how to be the best coach possible. And one of the things that I see that they all do is they rely solely on calories in, calories out. Let's calculate macros, let's track. And they're not getting to the root of the problem, which is we were never taught proper nutrition in the first place. So how the heck are we supposed to understand this complicated thing called macros? And I think just going that extra layer deeper is how I've been able to meet more women where they're truly at and make health and fitness and nutrition feel attainable for them, rather than just feeling like it's so overwhelming from the moment you start. So with that being said, that's why it's a problem, right? We can't start with tracking because imagine you have, and maybe this is you, right? You have no background in nutrition. You've never been taught how to eat properly, and you're trying to figure this out. You're trying to lose weight. You've been cycling through diet culture. Imagine this, right? Typically millennials, the age range, anywhere from 27 to 42 is the millennial age range. And we specifically have been really just culprit to diet culture our whole lives. Our moms were on diet after diet after diet. Many of you that are listening to this may also be in the population of being the moms that were on diet after diet after diet. And so all we learned growing up was what is restriction and what is being on a diet, but not what is proper nutrition, right? Maybe if you did learn that, that is amazing. But even myself with a fairly athletic upbringing, I didn't really learn these principles. And then we get thrown into college where we're basically broke and we need to just eat ramen and get by on whatever food credit system they have at college, and otherwise just kind of making do. And then we graduate and we get our own place. And then we basically are just left to learn all this stuff for ourselves. So we go on Pinterest, we find recipes, and we typically just fall into the pattern of diet after diet after diet. And then when that's all said and done, we maybe find a partner, we maybe have kids, and then we're like, oh my God, I have to feed this baby and I have to set an example. And this is when I initially speak to a lot of women who enter our program, is they are really concerned that they're not going to pass along the right behaviors or relationship with food, because having a baby then makes you aware of yourself and what you are actually perpetuating, the generational things you're perpetuating. And that's when we come in and we teach you these things literally for the first time. So don't feel guilty if you don't know this stuff. And a lot of times you feel overwhelmed, or you feel like, I should know this. Like, I've been dieting for so long. I've done all these diets. I should know how to track calories. But tracking calories is not nutrition, and tracking calories is not a lifestyle. So, allow yourself to have some grace, take a step back. Let's focus on the foundations. So I think just like if any of that resonated with you, just that whole life path, we've all been living it. So don't guilt yourself for not knowing this stuff and needing to go back to the basics, even if you've been doing diet after program after program. This is not that. Let's focus on a lifestyle first. So how we start our clients now typically is we're going to find the low-hanging fruit in their starting place. So the misconception that a lot of people have about one-on-one coaching is that it's you sign up and you get a plan, and here's the things you eat, here's what you do, go. When in reality, it's very different than that. It's very collaborative. So in order to actually meet you where you're at, we need to have a baseline. So for example, you sign up, okay, what do we do first? I would say take a written or photo or tracked, if you would like, if you have a neutral relationship with tracking. Most people don't. Log everything that you eat for a week or two. That stays pretty consistent, but what we do with that information is where it differs. So what we do is we typically have our clients log in a photo food diary so we can visually see what's going on. But if you don't have the opportunity or the ability to do that, you can just use MyFitnessPal to see that awareness, or you could just use a written, literally pen and paper, written food diary. And then you basically just want to make note of your portions as best you can. And also the first thing that we typically do is start to just ask ourselves, how hungry are we when we are sitting down to eat these meals? And we rank that on a specific hunger scale so we can know I'm not hungry, I am hungry. And the question to ask is, if you're not hungry, why are we eating, right? And start to dig into that relationship with food. Am I eating because I'm bored? Am I eating because I'm stressed? Am I eating because I have really rampant emotions right now and I'm turning to food as a coping mechanism? That could be really valuable information, because we've had clients start to lose weight just by healing their relationship with food, by becoming aware of those patterns without even changing anything about what they eat. Because a lot of times it's okay, what we eat, we can solve that immediately. We could go clear out our fridge, buy new groceries. But if we don't understand, when we're eating and how much we're eating and the relationship we have with eating, we don't really get anywhere in the long run. It's just a Band-Aid. So starting with that observation is so critical, because with being able to do that without judgment allows us to really just understand ourselves, our relationship with food, and kind of ask ourselves the questions like, where did this relationship with food come from? Like, do I turn to food for stress or celebration because as a kid I was always rewarded or punished with some sort of food reward system? And this stuff really does show up in our adult lives and impedes our ability to be consistent with things like a calorie deficit down the line, which is why we have to address it now. So observe, observe, observe. I would suggest, and this is where things get tough because we want results immediately, but we need to do the deeper work to actually understand our behavior and our thoughts and our eating patterns before we dive into the hit the ground running stuff. So let's spend 2 weeks, 14 full days. I know you're gonna hate me for this, but this is time well spent. How long have you spent dieting? How long have you spent dieting in your life? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? More? If the answer is any of those, then 2 weeks is nothing. And we need to remember that, even though we want to see results immediately. So 2 weeks observing. Let's take note of these patterns. And then from there, we can start to identify. And I promise you, when you do this, you will start to identify these things for yourself. I won't even need to do anything. Our clients do this all the time. They start saying, wow, I really don't want to log this and have my coach see it. I guess I won't eat it today. Or, wow, I'm really noticing that I'm super hungry after I eat this granola bar for breakfast. Maybe that's not substantial enough of a breakfast. And then it starts to spark the questions. Hey, coach, what should I have for breakfast, right? And so it begins this conversation. It begins this dialogue. And I mean, you can look up these answers as well, but like, what is a balanced breakfast? We'll get into that in the next steps. But the observation is the kickoff point, because if we don't have awareness of ourselves and our behaviors, then we're just band-aiding something with a cookie cutter approach that never really lasts. So that is how we begin. Then the low-hanging fruit is what's missing, right? Okay, do we have a regular eating cadence that is, maybe breakfast, lunch, dinner, a couple snacks, and are we satiated between sittings here? Or do we find that we're kind of just like grazing, grabbing the carby things, not really having well-balanced meals? Where are the holes that we're identifying? And if the holes are very tactical, like we just are not putting together well-rounded meals, that's the direction we'll go. If the holes are, we are really struggling with emotional eating, stress eating, coping with life happening and having any sort of consistency, we will go in that direction. And we'll solve, and basically if you think about like a leaking barrel, we're gonna plug the biggest hole first, right? And then from there, when we are dealing with emotional eating, we're learning how to, so I'll kind of go in the 2 directions here because a lot of people need to work on both, to be honest. And it's just a matter of which hole is bigger, and then we go one at a time. So emotional eating, if that is the struggle, then basically we want to go in the direction of learning how to properly feel our emotions and not shove them down and deal with them with food, whether that is stress, anger, sadness, anything like that. And the biggest misconception about this is that we have to kind of distract ourselves. We have to distract ourselves from our emotions and our stressors rather than actually attending to them. And what actually attending to them looks like is being able to sit with it, acknowledge it, see where it's coming from, and then ask ourselves, like, what do I actually need right now? So if I'm really anxious, like, do I need to like shove my face with Oreos? That's personally like one of my Achilles heels. So personal example, but if I'm really anxious, do I need to have extra Oreos to quell the anxiety? Or does that actually make it worse? What does make my anxiety better? Maybe it's brain dumping everything that kind of is in my head that's making me anxious out onto paper, or venting it out to my husband. Okay, those are positive coping mechanisms that actually get me somewhere. Can I work on implementing those and actually see the benefit of, wow, I didn't need food to cope with that, and get the reward from that as well. So that's kind of what that looks like. And really, it is a process that is painful because when we are trying to quote unquote fix behaviors that we don't like, we often think that once we have the tool, we're going to be able to just kind of flip a switch and stop doing the behavior we don't like. When in reality, progress looks like doing it maybe 5 times a week as a negative behavior, say overeating or stress eating. Let's say I'm doing it 5 times a week, every weeknight. Progress looks like bringing that down to 4 times a week and celebrating it. And then being like, okay, this is forward momentum. Let's keep going. 3 times a week, 2 times a week. And then maybe it's once every other week eventually. And it's not about getting rid of something entirely. It's about reducing frequency and actually being able to celebrate that. That's where we really struggle, I think, as high achievers, because we want to just have it be done. And that's not necessarily the way things work. That's not how behavior works. That's where holding ourselves accountable is hard, because in that awkward period where it's happening 4 times per week, we still want to be really down on ourselves and quit, when in reality we're making strides forward. So that's what that looks like. And then the opposite direction is tactical gaps. So you're not having properly well-balanced meals throughout the day. So there's a system and a framework to eating well-balanced meals that has nothing to do with calories, and it is using your hand. So your hand portions look like this. You have a palm-sized serving of protein, lean protein. So that could be your meats, your fish, your shellfish, your seafood, your yogurts, your eggs, your other dairy products, or your vegetarian, vegan sources of protein. Palm size, about a deck of cards. It's about 4 ounces or so. And it should equate to roughly 25 to 35 grams of protein per sitting. And then we have our carbs. So we're going to do a little scooped hand. If you hold your hand out like you're going to feed an animal, I guess, and you had a scooped portion of carbs in there, that's what that's going to look like. So those are our rices, our pastas, our breads, our grains, our potatoes, those sorts of things. And then our thumb is going to be our fat. So this is about a tablespoon or so worth of healthy fats. So that's going to be our oils, our butters, our nuts, our seeds, avocados, that sort of thing. And then lastly, our final one is vegetables. And I like to lump fruits into this as well. So veggies and fruits, fist. So I like to think, if one hand is like that claw machine at the arcade and I'm going down to grab something with the claw machine, I'm going to grab my whole fist. Whatever I would be able to do with that, with a whole fist, would be the portion size of vegetables or fruits for that meal. So those 4 components together make up a balanced meal. And the reason why we want to have these things together is because it actually does help with blood sugar regulation, sustained energy throughout the day, actually digesting these foods better and absorbing the nutrients from these foods better, but also keeping us full between meals. We're also more psychologically satisfied when we have that full meal, because we are seeing and tasting different textures and flavors. Our plate is fuller when we fill it up. And that is how we want to structure our days, having balanced meals across the day, at least 2, but probably a breakfast, lunch, dinner setup is going to be best. There's no magic number of meals, but it's just, how can we fit this into your life schedule and your hunger cues, and also nourish your body and not deprive your body of these things. And then we can kind of insert little high protein or fiber snacks in between throughout the day to continue to nourish our body. But that gives us a framework of imagine this, right? If you are eating balanced meals, that means and implies that you have also learned some food preparation skills. You understand how to get fruits, vegetables, proteins, carbs into your diet. You know how to shop for them. You know how to prepare them in a way that you enjoy. And that itself takes iteration. I think something people don't give themselves the time to do is ultimately sitting and really experimenting with the process of testing out recipes for a singular food group like vegetables. What vegetables do I like? How do I like them prepared? Do I like them air fried in the oven? Do I like them baked? Do I like them raw? What seasonings do I like on them? Do I like them with a specific dipping sauce? Do I like them in a specific way? Do I like them cut up? Do I like them whole? How do I like these? And a lot of times we blanket statement, I don't like vegetables. Well, that's not helpful, because if I were to ask that same person, I've done this all the time, by the way, so is there any particular vegetable that you have liked before? And they're like, oh, well, like corn on the cob, but that has a bunch of butter on it. So like, there's no way. Or, Brussels sprouts at restaurants, but I know those have bacon and da 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 da. And so it's like, okay, well, why don't we just try to recreate that in like a healthified way? That's totally possible. What's wrong with that, right? So it's being able to kind of be creative in those little things, because I promise you, you probably have plenty of iterations of vegetables that you like, but you just haven't given yourself the time or energy or space to try that. And instead, we've jumped all in to some crazy restrictive diet where it's like, eat only raw vegetables, like paleo or Whole30 or whatever. And we hate it because it's an overload and it's a bunch of stuff that we're forcing upon ourselves versus giving ourselves time and space to play with. So in this whole process of like managing emotional eating, managing our relationship with food, and building a foundation of balanced meals in our day-to-day life, this process typically takes our clients anywhere from 8 up to 16 total weeks to actually work through. Yes, 2 to 4 months of being patient with ourselves and actually building in these skills and these habits and these, honestly, life skills, like I was talking about. Like, we don't learn this stuff. No one teaches you this, which is why that's our mission too. But in the process of doing that, what happens when you center your diet around lean proteins, vegetables, healthy carbohydrates, listening to your hunger cues, not overeating? What happens? You feel better. Your pants get looser, you drop bloat, you have more energy, you start losing weight. We've had clients through this process. There's no focus on the scale. There's no focus on tracking. There's no focus on calories. We've had clients lose up to 30 pounds doing this alone. And that's not bullshit. And I won't say 30 pounds is the average. That's the up to. Typically, it's probably more like 5 to 10. But if you were able to like be so patient with yourself and not even feel like you're changing much and actually lose weight in the process, wouldn't that be enjoyable? Like if we could just like remove the expectation that we have to lose this much, this fast off the bat, like just let ourselves actually get into it. Come on, like, I know we all want that, and it's really hard when you're like in it. You're in it, and you're like, I need to see results right now. Every day, I need to see results right now. It's really hard when you're in it. But when you look at it from that bigger picture of like, okay, let's say that's 2 to 4 months. And then after that, we can get into the whole hit the ground running, measure progress better, really dial in specific results. That's fine. But imagine if you started with that, and you didn't have any of these foundations and you were just forcing yourself to kind of have all these skills or like kind of throw all these skills at the wall and just see if it can stick. That's so much at once, right? Rather, you've now built the foundation where you have the high protein meals, you have the stuff meal prepped, you have the right food sources available. Now to transition into something like tracking, which is going to be the next episode, it makes sense because you're like, that's protein, that's carbs, that's fat. I understand these food sources. Tracking just assigns numerical values to it and makes it make a little bit more sense in the context of calories, macros, versus just looking at things as their value is calories, which doesn't help us because that leads us down the rabbit hole of eating a bunch of disgusting diet foods and not actually enjoying anything that we eat. So that is going to be the foundation that makes that make more sense. And then it's really like titrating in the tracking that allows us to make progress more predictable, because when you know all of the inputs and you are measuring and managing all the variables, you can predictably see more progress. There is absolutely truth to that, and tracking should be a part of a elongated fat loss or weight loss program and phase. But how it's approached is really the differing factor there. So that is really the lead up. And yes, it should take you 2 to 4 months. And listen, some clients it takes a little bit faster. Maybe they do have a leg up on these skills or they do have these habits in place. Cool. We'll meet you where you're at. Find the low hanging fruit where you are, but don't skip this step, because you will find blind spots if you are open to it and you pay attention. And maybe it only takes you a couple of weeks to find and close those blind spots, but that's not everyone. On average, it will take about 8 to 10 weeks to get through all of this average. So that means some clients, it could take 2-3 weeks, and that is okay too. Some clients though, it's gonna take 4, maybe even 5 months, right? So there's always a spectrum when it comes to averages. And so I'm telling you to just be open to the new way of doing things, because if you've been the person that's dove into MyFitnessPal and tracked 1,200 calories and hated your life and lost weight and then gained it back as soon as the diet was over, you're not going to be successful if you just do something like that again. If you were to skip to part 2 of this episode and just ignore everything else that I said here, you're probably gonna see a repeat of that over and over again. And what may have taken you 2 to 4 months to get to the tracking portion, to the next phase, and maybe this whole journey in total takes you 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and you're like, ugh, that's a long time. Well, if you are continuing to diet and gain weight and diet and gain weight and diet and gain weight over the course of 3 or 4 or 5 summers, which one actually takes you longer? And that's the thing you have to remember. So that is pretty much, I mean, in summation, that's the summary of what we call our mindful priming method at PCC. And that's the foundation building portion of our program that we lead into seeing those more tangible results after that. But ultimately, I want you to take that and really hone in on those skills. Emotional eating, stress eating, how do you cope with that? And building in your balanced plate and giving yourself the time to be able to actually see, how do I like to prepare these things? How do I like to meal prep, grocery shop? What's my staples? And how do I balance my nutrition across the day? That comes first. And just observe yourself and recognize those patterns and go one thing at a time. When you're able to do that, you've developed resilience and patience with yourself that is unlike any other, and you're going to be so much more successful, not only in the long run of losing the weight, but keeping the damn weight off, because what you just worked on is the lifestyle you fall back on after the fact, right? So this all is starting to make sense. Okay, that's how I live my life. I don't live my life in a diet. I live my life with those foundations. So it gives you that preview of like, what is life like after the diet, which we'll get to. And there's little nuances with that too, but that's it for episode 1. I'm gonna try to keep each of these under 30 minutes. But if you liked this, let me know by subscribing to the podcast, giving us some feedback, giving us a 5-star rating. I appreciate your attention if you watch this the whole way through, especially on the live stream. But with that being said, we're going to be back here for part 2 next week. And if you are interested in learning about having help in this journey, having someone guide you through exactly what I just walked you through and more, that's what our one-on-one coaching program is for. And so I'm not shy here with all this information. This is everything that we do, and I'm happy to divulge any other details that I'm missing that might help you implement this on your own. But if you're just finding that being on your own is lonely, confusing, and we tend to second guess ourselves, then that's what we're here for. So just reach out to me with a message, an email, or submit an application through the link in the show notes, and we can talk about how this might be a good fit for you. So thank you so much for listening, and I appreciate your attention, as I know it's your most valuable resource, and I will see you back here next week.